Hi, and welcome to our session on sync and preparing for sync. We're going to start with a short presentation. Here we go. So just a bit about myself. My name is Clare Everson. I'm a music supervisor at 20 Below Music. We have a focus on music supervision for advertising, as well as some more long form content as well. I previously worked at Management Day Music Publishing, a small music publisher, independent music publisher, and looking after sync and licensing. So in this presentation, I'm going to cover a bit about, sort of top line about what you can do to prepare for sync, sort of what you need to do to make sure that if an opportunity comes in, we're ready, and also, some more sort of additional bonuses for if you do want to put more time and effort into sync, then, some ideas for that. So getting straight into it, getting set up. So one of the fundamentals really of sync is the publishing and the master rights. So if you are working on, if you're producing or writing a song, then you want to be registering both the publishing and the master rights. So publishing, you'll need to register on PRS, and master rights on PPL. This makes sure that, if a sync opportunity does come up, people are able to trace the rights of that song and the track. To this point, so it's really important to get your splits in writing. Say you are writing or co-writing a song or a piece or a track, then you want to make sure that everyone is clear about, who owns what share of the rights on that song and on that track. So try and get it in writing so that, everyone knows they're all agreed and that 100% of the rights are accounted for. Because say I'm, trying to license a track and say 2% isn't claimed, then, we can't sync that track. So that's really important. Fill in clear and thorough metadata. To this point, again, it's sort of, if on the track, if I, maybe I got sent the track today and then it's in a year's time when I want to license the track, for a good project, then if I need to know sort of who sent me that track, who I should be getting in contact with, and what the rights are on that track, so that I can make sure that the clearance process is as sort of smooth as possible. Who should I get my music in front of? So if you are, an independent artist, then you can be getting your music in front of music supervisors who will then be able to use your music for media. And any other, there are other people that also might be using music for media, but that's sort of a good surefire way. And how should you present your music and when you are getting in touch with, say, a music supervisor? So email is great, a little bit of a blurb, maybe about yourself or the artist, and then a download link to the track or the music or the album is the best, because I can then, I have my playlisting systems. A lot of people use Disco, so that's sort of a platform that supervisors and rights holders use to sort of playlist and have all their tracks in one place. And then also, it's important to have some keywords about the genre and the style of the music, so that if anyone's doing a keyword search, your track's definitely going to come up. So moving on to what to expect if a sync license or an opportunity does come about, just so that we're sort of prepared when it does, or if it does happen. So a sync license, there will be a license for the publishing rights on the track. There will be a master license for the master and the recording on the track. And in that license, the kind of parameters that you'll be looking at is the territory, where it's sort of they want to use your music worldwide on a campaign, or is it just sort of UK TV? So is it just one territory? Media, is it online? Is it TV? Is it cinema? All that kind of media. And also the term, are you looking for just, they're looking for, say, a month or a year or in perpetuity? So they're kind of parameters that are going to come up in a sync license. MFN you might also see come up, and just with respect to a sync license, that can mean that the publishing and the master fee, so that there's a fee for the publishing, a fee for the master, and MFN will mean that those two are the same. For example, the exception to this would be, for example, a cover. So if you've covered a song and the publishing, the song is a really huge track, then that might require a larger fee. So that's where it can vary. Publishing and label deals, just wanted to throw this in to sort of, if you are going into a publishing deal or a label deal, just to be aware of what those deals, what that means for sync, just to make sure you're really clear about if a company does procure a sync license for you and a sync opportunity, then maybe what the share is going to be on that fee. Blanket licenses, also good to be aware of. So some broadcasters will use blanket licenses instead of a direct sync license. So that's another thing to be aware of, where there's not necessarily a sort of a specific sync fee in those cases. And also royalties. So with sort of particular sync license, say it's on TV and it's getting shown a lot, then there'll also be sort of royalties coming in afterwards, after you've got your sort of initial sync fee. Extra bonuses. So if we're thinking about, perhaps you want to put more time and effort into something sort of extra in the kind of sync opportunity world, we can do sort of tailored edits for sync. So, immediately, perhaps if your song does have a vocal on it, then you can be providing an instrumental as well. Because obviously, say for an advert, and there's a lot of VO or heavy VO on the advert, then maybe an instrumental is worthwhile providing. Other tailored edits you could do for sync, for example, often with a film or with an advert, you might want, a big sort of emotional build in it, for example. So perhaps, and also just to be aware, often the sync isn't for the whole length of the track. So maybe you want to do a couple of edits, like a 1 minute cut down, for example, that might be that makes it slightly easier and quicker to sort of place on a spot. That does not mean that if you just send your full track, it's not going to get synced. Obviously, editors can edit tracks, but it could be useful to think about. Or if maybe you're listening to the instrumental and you're thinking, oh, you know what, maybe if I put like a string line in there, building strings, then perhaps that could be really great for a trailer, for example. So those kind of tailored edits can be worthwhile. Build relationships and send to relevant contacts. So that's just doing more, because music discovery these days, we can be discovering music online and all the different DSPs, but also, building contacts in this kind of world, making people aware of your music, that can be useful as well. Having a sync agent, this is just an additional aspect to maybe consider, where you're not directly signing a publishing deal, but a sync agent can represent your music in their catalogue. They have a lot of different contacts in this kind of world for pitching music, so they can spend the time pitching your music for you if you don't have time. Covers are another thing to maybe think about. I'm sure a lot of people have heard covers used, over Christmas campaigns or trailers and that kind of thing, doing a song in a very different way, perhaps like super sort of stripped back, scary way, for example, for a trailer. That they can be, great creatively. You do just have to be aware that if it is, as I mentioned, a big song, well-known song, then the publishing needs to be cleared too. So, that's that. Maybe being aware of who publishes the track, for example, could be useful. And then library music or production music, getting in touch with or maybe reading a bit about different production music libraries if you're interested to write specific tracks for sync. There can be, a fee involved to pay for maybe like one song or a full album. And then, they will then, as with the sync agent, the production music libraries will have your tracks and you could get sort of income that way as well. And just a few FAQs. Do I need a label or publisher? So this is, a question that does come up a fair amount. Labels and publishers, it's absolutely up to the individual artist what you want to do. There are many benefits of having a company behind you who can pitch your music for you, and they already have those established relationships and that kind of thing, and can collect internationally for royalties for you. However, it is possible to do it by yourself if you want to, pitch your music to supervisors, for example. As long as you have, registered everything with the, PRS or PPO, as we mentioned, then it's up to you what you want to do with your time in terms of sync. How much do I quote, and should I refuse if the fee isn't high enough? This question is absolutely, it's how long is a piece of string? How much do I quote? What you will want to be sort of focusing this on or basing it on are the parameters in that sync license. So the media, the term, the territory. If someone is asking to use your track, in perpetuity, worldwide, all media, that is going to require a significantly higher fee than if it was a month, one territory, for, etc. So, but it's to the point of it's absolutely up to you what you are comfortable with. You might not be comfortable with a particular brand, or you might have a passion and interest for something, and that might dictate whether you're open to a lower fee, for example, for something. So it's absolutely up to you what you are comfortable with. And even if someone else would say yes to something, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should. So it's your music. It's your property. It's absolutely up to you what you do. And when will I get a sync? Because I just wanted to conclude this because it can be so unpredictable, which is, it's an amazing thing about sync. It can be that, perhaps you pitch a track, you send it to someone, and the next day they're working on, that kind of genre, and your track is front and center in their mind, and they come back to it. Or it could be that, you pitch a track to someone, they absolutely love it, but the opportunity for it, for a sync doesn't come about for a while, and that could be months, year, whatever. So it is unpredictable, but there are lots of opportunities out there, and particularly you don't have to be a huge well-known artist to get a sync. It's all about music quality, music style, shape and structure, and sort of marrying it with the campaign or the picture or the film. So yes. So this comes to the end of my presentation, and we'll soon be moving on to the panel.
Hi everyone. First off, I just wanted to thank Claire for an excellent introduction to Sync. I'd now like to welcome you all to the new Opportunities in Sync panel. We have an excellent lineup of speakers joining Claire, who are able to contribute a range of insightful perspectives on sync opportunities today. And in particular, this panel will explore how COVID-19 may have impacted sync opportunities, and how music creators and managers can take advantage of opportunities in today's climate. So let's introduce the panel. First up, my name is Nicky Carder, and I'm the membership manager at the Ivors Academy, the UK's professional association for songwriters and composers. And I'm joined today by Clare Everson, who's just presented to you, and Mark Gordon from Score Draw Music, and Robyn Kennedy from Bucks Music. So just to kick things off, I'm going to hand over to each panelist just to find out a bit more about them and what perspectives they can bring to the panel today. So Clare, I'm just going to circle back to you. Can you just remind us what your specialities are and what perspective you can bring?
So I'm a music supervisor at 20 Below Music. We do sort of offer all music supervision services, so whether that's sync, licensing, a creative search, and also bespoke composition, as well as production music. Previously I managed sync and licensing at Management Dade Music Publishing, representing a roster or a catalogue of artists and composers in the contemporary classical and electronic world. So bringing perspectives from supervision, sync for an independent publisher today.
That's great. Mark, can we hand over to you? What are you bringing to the panel today?
What am I bringing to the panel? Good question. Experience, I guess, as a composer, which is what I am. I run a company called Score Music. We're a company of 6 or 7 composers and audio people with studios in the UK and also in Ireland. We mainly compose for children's music and have probably done about 600 or 700 episodes of children's music. We're currently working on shows for CITV, CBBC, PBS Kids, Nickelodeon Junior, and lots of other people in kids, but also, you know, like many composers, done a fair bit of advertising, some film work, a lot of television work as well. I also sit on an Ivors Academy board, which is the media composer board, and we look obviously at kind of rights issues in a wider context around the composition community in the UK, specifically to do with things, you know, like the rise of VODs, Netflix, Amazon, whatnot, composer buyouts, remuneration, copyright. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff as well. But I guess, yeah, a long-standing composer who's worked in the industry for many years and has been on millions of panels just about stuff like this. So very happy to be here today.
Sounds excellent. Thanks, Mark. And Robyn, just to hand over to you.
Yeah, my name's Robyn Kennedy. I'm the Senior Sync Manager at Bucks Music Group. So I've been in sync for about 10 years now, kind of working across all genres, so advertising, film, TV, games, and kind of now in the new media, looking at TikTok and stuff like that, which is really exciting. Yeah, so I've mainly worked for independent publishers, but I also have some experience working with some label and master rights. Yeah, I'm just really excited to be here today and talk about sync.
That sounds great. I mean, something that took me a while to get my head around when I was learning about the industry was really the difference between a sync and composing for media and what that is, because it's slightly different. And obviously you have different partners and, you know, but you potentially have an exclusive publisher if you're a songwriter, and then probably not if you just compose for media. But I'd love, maybe Mark might be a good person to start with on that, if you could give us a bit of an insight on the differences.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, you know, Clare characterized it really well as well. I mean, I see it, if you imagine any piece of content that's on film or television or advertising or gaming, it's probably going to be one of 3 things that is creating the music. Number 1 would be sync. And what I think of as being sync is if an artist or a producer or a band or a songwriter has written a song, and they've written the song just because they wanted to write a song that day. And then it might find the secondary usage, which is what sync is, where, you know, someone wants to use it in an Adidas advert and whatnot. And that's a kind of non-exclusive license. The track is in the public domain already. It's on Spotify already, or, you know, it's been released. It's on 6 Music. They're playing it at festivals, but it has a secondary use as a sync. So that's number 1. Then number 2 is what we do. So that's commissioned composed music. So that's when a producer will come to us and say, hey, I'm doing a 52-part series on Nickelodeon. It's about, I don't know, cowboys in space. And would you like to do the music? So then they commission us to write original music, episode by episode, scene by scene. They tend to own the master recording, and they also have equity in the PRS, the back end. That's number 2. And then number 3, the third type of music that could be used in a project, as mentioned, is library music or production music, whereby, you know, people just sit and they write library albums, instrumental cues, which you would hear in, you know, montage on Bake Off or MasterChef or something. So it tends to be, it's one of those 3 things. I guess that's what we're talking about today, these 3 different ways in which music can kind of end up on an advert or in a scene. So yeah, sync is very different to kind of commission music. You know, I'm asked to write a piece of music, and then I write it, and then I give it to you, and you pay me for it, and that's it. Whereas sync is, you know, you could have like 10 or 15 syncs for a song. Look at something like, you know, Pumped Up Kicks by Foster and the People. It was on 1 million shows and 1 million ads. So that's the main difference.
Thanks, Mark. And, you know, Clare, you touched on elements of that as well in your presentation, which was really exciting and insightful. So I don't know, Robyn, if you've got anything else to add on that before we move on to what opportunities there are.
I'd only say with library, it's something to consider is that you have a rate card, so you don't get to negotiate or anything like that. There's kind of a rate card, and that's what you're paid for the use of the music. Whereas in sync, you get to negotiate your terms. You get to say, no, I want more money, or no, I want a shorter term, or no, I'm not happy with that brand. So that's just something to consider as well.
Thanks, Robyn. That sounds great. So I suppose the big elephant in the room for the industry the last wee while has been COVID and the impact that's had. You know, it shut down not only the music industry, but the production of a lot of film and TV. So I'd love to, go back to you, Robyn, and just start, how has, in your opinion, COVID impacted sync opportunities or other opportunities? And what do the trends look like at the moment?
Yeah, so I don't know about anyone else, but we've had a very busy COVID. I think for a lot of like advertisers, maybe they were doing kind of shorter runs just because, normally for an advertiser, you'll have your main campaign that lasts for the year, and you might do smaller campaigns inside of that. But yeah, it seemed to, I think there was a lot of uncertainty of what was going on. So instead of seeing these big deals for a year and a lot of money, we were kind of suddenly doing these, month by month, different deals, and everything was kind of different. I think at the start it was, we want songs about home and togetherness and uplifting and family. And then there was that kind of brief, everything opened up and all the songs were like, we're back, and we want trumpets and celebration. And then it went back to, oh no, we're stuck inside, please send us songs about being at home and loving your family and being there for your friends, and we're all in this together. So now recently things seem to be again a lot more triumphant. They want a lot of uplifting, they want really fun, not necessarily kind of referencing that we're free, but a lot of kind of togetherness, and we made it through together, which is, it's kind of been a bit of a ride. But also kind of TV, I know TV and film shut down, so that went quiet for a bit. I think at the start a lot of TV and film got pulled forward because they realized that people were going to need a lot of content, so we suddenly got a load of requests pushed forward that we weren't kind of ready to license for a few months. So that was kind of quite nice. But then we had a bit of a dead period where no one was making any content, but that's kind of started again now. So that's really excited to see. So it's been a bit of a wild ride, but it's been good for us.
Yeah, it's great that, despite the disruption, that's actually been a bit of a catalyst for other opportunities. As you say, lots of smaller, sort of a larger turnover of commissioning opportunities as I suppose, and sync opportunities, as opposed to lots of big features, which is quite exciting as well. And it's really positive for creators that are looking to make money, I suppose, to know that the whole industry didn't shut down, akin to potentially the live industry, which is really cool. So I know, Clare, you also work a lot with advertising, and are you seeing the same sort of trends where you're working?
Yeah, I think as Robyn was saying, sort of now, we've had some other things for sort of nostalgia and, nostalgia for a certain time. And therefore, on that kind of project, I'm looking for, maybe a quality in the recording that, might sound a bit more nostalgic. But also, we've had the trends that sort of go up and down every year as well. Like, say for sort of Christmas time projects, which actually we'd be working on, months and months before, that is quite different, and might have, say, more sync in those and maybe more covers. And then actually recently, we've been doing a lot of bespoke composition for advertising. So I do think, for all artists, that bespoke side is something that is available. Like, as when I was saying about sort of pitching your music and pitching your songs, you can also say, hey, and I'm also interested in composition and for advertising as well, in your key genres that you're great at.
Mark, how have you experienced the opportunities, and how has kids music fared over COVID?
Well, so the interesting thing about kids music is that, especially in animation, if you kind of imagine how drama and light production works, obviously it's lots of people, in rooms together. But in animation, actually, it's just lots of people working on computers, and there's very little stuff where more than one person needs to be in a room at the same time. So in fact, ironically, what happened in animation was it got more busy over lockdown because there was more stuff commissioned, because just as the other panelists have been saying, yeah, everybody is kind of mindful of the fact that they want to be kind of delivering content in a sort of pretty continuous way. So the work that we did in animation actually got a lot busier. And funnily enough, the only thing that we had to kind of crack was how to do things like remote recording when we're recording people who are singing songs that we were writing. So we ended up buying like lots and lots of podcast microphones and sending them all around the world to people that we were working with. So that was really good. It's exactly the same in gaming. Gaming has kind of like really flourished over the last 18 months in independent game companies. We're working on a game at the moment, a dinosaur sim game with a company that was just bought by Epic Games, the people who do Fortnite. So, you know, anecdotally, we're hearing from the gaming sector that, again, the long tail of gaming, which felt like it was maybe, you know, historically, you know, a bit more ubiquitous, is kind of really flourishing and interesting. Obviously, we're here at Y Days virtually in Edinburgh, and the gaming scene in Scotland, in many ways, it was kind of leading the UK. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in animation and gaming as well. And in fact, those sectors have grown. They've definitely grown. They probably outperformed compared to live action and other forms. So yeah, I mean, you know, lots of good news, which is nice to kind of hear about kind of work in those sectors.
Absolutely. I mean, we did a member survey recently, and it's very clear that our sort of highest earning members are those that work in the media sphere. So it is, you know, definitely a lucrative area to get into if you're interested in having a long-term career as a music creator. So winding back to you don't have a long-term career, you don't have a track record doing amazing kids compositions and all sorts of exciting things that Mark and the creators you work with are doing. So how do you get started? So you've written, you maybe released a few EPs, singles, and maybe an album. You've never had a sync before, you've never composed before. How do you get your foot in the door? And is it easy to do that, or do you really need to leverage and get to know people to get those opportunities? So Robyn, let's start with you. What would you say to a brand new person that's looking to get in the door?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it can be really daunting. I was kind of saying earlier in some meetings with some people, like, I've been doing this for 10 years. For me, it's like, of course, it's so easy. You just email that person and it's fine. But I guess if you're kind of new into it, it does seem a bit like the door is closed and you just need to find a little wedge to find your way in. I always kind of think about your music and where you see it. There's no point in sending like death metal to, you know, someone who's doing a nice like advert for Tropicana or something, because it's just never going to work. I mean, stranger things have happened, but for the most part, it won't work. So I think kind of really listen to your music, try and get other people's perspectives. Do they maybe see it in like kind of TV dramas, or maybe kind of a certain style of film? And I think TV and film is a really good place to start, because there's just so much content being made. The turnaround time is a little bit slower. So what I always recommend is go on IMDb, see who's supervising kind of upcoming shows. Maybe it's a new series of a show you really like, or you know, someone who's a new director who's kind of, you know, working on another show. See who's music supervising it. That information is all in there. Do a little Google, find their website, and just drop them a line. Try and keep it kind of, you know, concise and to the point, but say why you think your music would work for them. And yeah, see where it goes. I mean, sync is one of those ones where it's, you have to be in the right place at the right time, which is a really hard thing to kind of plan for. But I've heard so many stories of just emailing a supervisor and it just happened to work for the thing they were working on, and that's been really great. So that's definitely kind of my advice to get started.
Yeah, picking up on that point, having to be in the right place at the right time. Music supervisors I've spoken to before have said, you know, a lot of people get in touch with, you know, a set of music, and at that very moment, they're, you know, allocating tracks for an Iraqi, you know, a documentary or something based in 2003, and actually at that moment they're not interested or able to work with that music. But then those creators or managers never follow up again, or never get in touch and say, actually, you know, what are you working on 6 months later, a year later? And it's that one shot, and then, you know, sort of shy away. Would you agree with that, Claire, you know, in terms of the importance of follow-up?
I would say it depends. If someone, as you just said, if someone sends me a track and it is in a particular genre, I know that, you know, in this job, honestly, today I'll be working on Afrobeats. Tomorrow I'm working on, you know, some like 60s music or something. So when the opportunity, like when the brief comes in, there's always a quick turnaround. There's always quite sort of go. So actually what we do try to do to prepare for that is when we get music in, you know, we will playlist it to make sure that when we do get that very, you know, specific or quite niche brief in, we can go to that playlist. So, and you know, and that would be from someone not following up. So there are ways that, you know, your one-off pitch will also might get playlisted, but I always, you know, one follow-up is absolutely cool. Like, I think don't follow up every week for a year, but I think, you know, some check-ins and, you know, maybe out of, you know, you do a big pitch to a lot of different people, and, you know, maybe from that, like 3 will actually get back to you, or, you know, because even if people aren't getting back to you, it doesn't necessarily mean that they haven't like downloaded your track or something. So it's kind of good to know also if maybe if you do use disco, I think you can get some like playlist stats, so you can see maybe how many people have like downloaded or streamed, and then you get an insight whether people, you know, have taken it on board. But yeah, I think people are open to like having a coffee if they've got time, or, you know, everyone loves a gig when gigs are back on again. So yeah, keep sort of making those contacts.
Sounds like a really well organized strategy you have there. I think I can I'll try and, you know, embody some of that in other topics with my feeling. Anyway, Mark, how did you get started in all of this?
Oh, well, I mean, it's funny because I actually got started by, I was in bands and I had tracks that I had co-written that actually were synced. And then, just as you were sort of saying earlier on, I used the sync stuff as leverage to start getting composition work. So I think, so the first thing I think is that all the kind of historic lanes that used to exist between kind of composers and songwriters and producers and people who do library, I don't think any of that exists anymore. I think when people are looking for somebody for a project, what they're looking for are kind of like awesome creative polymaths. So if you look at people like my fellow Ivors Academy media committee member Hannah Peel, or someone like Jeff Barrow from Portishead, who's also a composer of film or TV, or Stuart Braithwaite from Mogwai, or Anna Meredith, 2 amazing Scottish kind of composer producers. There are people who are working across lots of different lanes, but what they're kind of transmitting is just an awesome sort of creativity. So the thing that people struggle with at the start, as you said, is getting their first gigs. And the biggest chicken and egg thing is you could find that you run into a producer of content across anything, TV or film or advertising, whatever it is, and you say, I think I'd be really good at doing your next short film. And the first thing they say to you is, oh, great, can I see your show reel? And then you say, I haven't got one. But if I did this gig with you, then I would have like a 30-second thing that I could use as part of a show reel to get my next gig and get my next gig. And that is the kind of hardest point, is the point at the start for people who are coming in. Let's say they're in like a post-rock band, or let's say they're in a kind of like, you know, modern classical minimalist piano kind of Max Richtery vibe or something like that, as so many people are these days. It's kind of like about, if you get the opportunity to do the pitching, because just as you know, as we were saying, it, you know, when that door cracks open once from all the different kind of things that you're trying to get, you need to be kind of like set up to go and sort of do that one kind of cold email that will just transmit authenticity, creativity, but also professionalism. Like, I do know what the master recording is. I do know that it's a cover, but I've been to Cobalt and they say that this cover is clearable for advertising or trailers or whatnot. So I think it's kind of, I think there are ways that you can get around this early doors thing of like, well, where's my show reel? What does it feel like when my music is laid up to picture? I think, you know, there are many websites such as the one that we used to use 15 years ago, which is archive.org, where you can pull down content and just start either kind of like writing music to it. So this could be content, you know, this is open source, Creative Commons content, like a 1950s, you know, I don't know, Russian surf film, or like a 1978 Eastern European kind of like constructive animation film, and just start laying up your music to it if it's sync, or starting to write something to it and start to create your own show reels. So you create energy around what you do creatively. And then when you're knocking at the door of somebody, you can kind of give them more than I just think I would be awesome at doing this. Because that's the other thing as well, is that I think when these opportunities appear, what people want to hear is that you're showing a bit of commitment, not just that you're hedging between all the different parts of your career and being like, oh, I heard about, make a bit of money from sync whilst I'm not touring or something like that, because that just doesn't come across as being like authentic and kind of real. And people, it's like the sniff test, that it doesn't feel right. I don't want to work with that person. So I think, there's so many things that you can do to kind of like immediately put yourself in that top kind of 1% of early doors coming in, wanting to pitch, wanting to do stuff in this area, but just kind of like with this energy that people will respond to. Because, and this is the last thing we say, I promise, is that all these people that you're pitching to, they're all kind of creative visual people. So if you're coming to them with some great content or some great content in your socials or whatever, or, they will respond to cool stuff. So I think all of that, you've got to kind of bottle all of that. And then that should be kind of how you start to approach it. And don't start to email people until you've done all of that, because you can't do an email and be like, this is the demo, but in 6 months, it's going to sound awesome. Because it'd be like, well, what's 6 months to me? I don't know what I'm going to be doing in 6 months. So, make the first impression once and make it well.
I mean, another point just to draw out on, creating that show reel. You've got all these student filmmakers that are desperate for people to send them music that's not really expensive, just to, build that portfolio as well. Before I worked to the Ivors Academy, I used to work at the Music Managers Forum, and I found a lot that creators that weren't really sure how to get opportunities, sort of were aiming for this magic industry person that might change their life. I just want a manager because a manager will change this. I just want a publisher because the publisher will do this. When actually, if you want to be writing to brief and getting commissions for, say, the BBC, having an exclusive publishing deal might actually be a bit of a hindrance to that. So, have you guys found that, people are just looking for this magic solution rather than just, being a bit strategic about, okay, what do I want? Who's, commissioning, or who's, music supervising this, and then getting in touch with them directly? Do you find there's a barrier for people that want to contact you? Robyn, maybe you can.
Yeah, I think it comes across a lot. Like, I've done a few panels kind of of people trying to get into the industry or kind of starting out in their careers and trying to get sync. And I say it time and time again, it's not like this kind of mythical thing that's inaccessible. Everyone's email is on Google. It's really easy to get in contact with people. And I think a lot of people are just really scared of taking that first step. And it's always, I think that, having a manager or a publisher is going to be like the magic ingredient to their career. It's never that. You have to do a lot of the hard graft yourself still, and no one's going to be a better cheerleader for you than you. So I think that's kind of really important. You have to put in a lot. We're here to help. We've got the sync contacts. We'll do all, we'll help with that. But I mean, the amount of writers who's got things just because they were at an industry party, started chatting to a director, got their own gigs. I'm like, brilliant, go for it. We're here to help and advise where we can, but also you could do a lot of it yourself. It just goes to show you don't really need a publisher or a label sometimes. I feel like I'm doing myself out of a job, but there you go.
Also, what I was going to say is you don't obviously, Mark makes some really good points. I think in terms of sync, you just for your own EP or album, you don't necessarily need a show reel. For example, if someone sent me a great album, if there's one track on there that's perfect for a campaign, then I'm not expecting you to have loads and loads of multiple syncs before that. That sort of, as we're saying, with the unpredictability of sync, it can just be very one-off. And the other thing I wanted to say was that when you are contacting people, to be sort of genre specific, as Mark was saying, like I think saying you sort of can do everything all at once all the time. What I would really love to work with someone is, what you really love doing, what your specific genre and style and, your uniqueness is. So, and I want to go to someone when that project comes up, to the best person who does that. So I think it's quite good also to be quite clear about what you are best at and what you can bring.
Yeah, I mean, like I think like Claire said it really, really well there, and it's that thing about the best, the best person for the job. And when I, as a composer, when I start out composing, you kind of have to try a lot of different things because you sort of don't know which way you're going to go. We ended up in kids just because that seemed to be the thing that I don't know. It says something, I think, about us as composers, that the music we mainly write for is for like 3 to 5 year olds. But it's definitely been helpful to have a specialism. That means that we can kind of be like, well, this is what we do. We don't do this, and we don't do this, and we don't do this. And yeah, I think, for friends of mine who work in music supervision, that's absolutely right. And they're not scared to go with really niche artists, but they have to feel when they email them like the artists are going to understand the rights immediately, understand the landscape, ideally pretty quickly, and be quite up to speed about, okay, it's this, and it's 6 months, and it's and that's okay, and this is the kind of the rate you should expect. And the one thing I wanted to say about quoting, because I thought that was really interesting, what was chatted about earlier to do with quoting, a thing that we used to do, if someone said to us, like, what fee would you charge for this? For any job, I tend to go, well, you have the fee already. If you're at the stage whereby you want to commission music, you have the budget line in for the music already. So why don't you tell me what it is, and I'll tell you if it feels like it's in the right sort of ballpark. So you kind of put the compunction back on them. If they're ready to commission music, they know what the budget line is. Just make them tell you.
Yeah, so what's really positive about the discussions we're having is it seems that there's a lot a creator can do by just sort of sitting down and doing some research and being strategic and working out, who places music that, sounds similar to them. And actually, instead of just looking for somebody that open all the doors, it's just sitting down and, finding, Robyn and Clare and Mark, and then, Mark's output every year because you work a lot on that festival. So it's like, you can find these people at certain events, which is really, really, I think, encouraging if you feel a bit lost and you're at the start of that journey. But going on from quoting, affordability is another thing. The other day, I got a panicked call from a production company who were about to release an advert. It was going out in a week's time, and the track that they'd originally synced to the advert, they waited for ages to license it and then realized they couldn't afford it because it was a very, very famous track. And then very quickly they wanted a composer or to sync another track that have a similar nature to it, so for much less. So actually, by being a newer composer or have a more grassroots band that doesn't have a record label or a publisher that's pushing for huge fees, there's maybe a window of opportunity there. Robyn, would you say that was the case?
I think there is, but also it's important not to be taken advantage of. I know
that as an Ivors Academy member, we want to make sure everyone is really
No, of course. Sorry, I don't mean to imply anything. I think it's a really tricky thing because, like, I know what I'm going to quote for something because I have 10 years of experience behind me and I've licensed a million adverts and TV shows and things, so I know what feels right. And if someone kind of says to you, I'll give you £1,000 for this, and you're like, well, I need to pay my rent and eat, that's a lot of money. But actually kind of looking at it, if you had a publisher or a label, they would say, well, actually that was worth 10,000 or 50,000. It's kind of really tricky. I know there are kind of resources online who kind of give guidelines of roughly what you should be, because, if you've never been in this game before, do you charge £200 or do you charge £20,000? It's a big difference. So there are definitely resources online to kind of guide you on fees, but at the end of the day, it's down to you. And if it feels right to you, then you have to take it. But you can always ask around and ask other people what they think. If it's something where you've done a cover, you could ask what the publisher has quoted. So there's kind of ways around it, but I think at the end of the day, you kind of have to go with your gut and whether it feels right for you.
You definitely need to share those resources if we can find them afterwards, because understanding what fees to ask for is a huge asset to any creator who's not got that experience. And
I know AIM have one. If anyone's a member of AIM, they've kind of put together a thing which is really handy, and I think there's a few others, but I'll try and find them and kind of link them afterwards.
Absolutely. So that's AIM, which is the Association of Independent Music, for those that are unfamiliar. But if you're a regular Wide Days attendee, you will know all about AIM. But Clare, I didn't know if you wanted to kind of talk a bit more around there's that publishing share and the recording share. And I know for sync, you have to pay for the, it's an equal for each part of the song. So I don't know if you want, of the track. So I don't know if you want to talk about that in a little more detail.
Yeah, I guess going into more detail, yeah, for the song, as we were saying, it's this, the fee for the publishing and for the master. For a cover, for example, I've had sort of artists and composers asking me, just sort of friends saying, hey, like we did this cover of, a huge well-known song, and they've said it's not MFN, because I think that is a good way to gauge. For example, if you're being asked to sync a track in an episode or a TV episode, for example, you could say, or like a more independent production, you could say, what's sort of the budget for the whole production, is my track sort of MFN with all the other tracks in the production, and if they've paid for one Beyonce track, and now they're licensing, music from more sort of up and coming artists, then perhaps it wouldn't be the same. But that can be a gauge. But yeah, for covers, it sometimes isn't, just because something that's really well known from a well-known artist, can sort of require a really big fee. So then it's up to what you feel comfortable with. Yeah.
So if I did a cover of a Beyonce song, say, and Beyonce's publisher wanted £30,000 or more for that, are you then able to, for the recording, pitch in lower than that? You're like, oh, you can have, if it gets approved by the publisher for 30,000, but there's only £31,000 in the budget, I'll take £1,000 for the recording side. Are you allowed to do that, or does it have to be equal?
I think Robyn, you feel like?
Oh no, I was just going to say, yeah, you can absolutely. It doesn't have to be MFN. MFN is a really good thing to ask for, because it means that everyone kind of gets paid the same, pro rata, obviously, if you've only got a percentage of the publishing. But yeah, there's no. I mean, you could even do it gratis if you wanted. I know artists who've really wanted it to work, and they've just let them have it for free. So there isn't really kind of a standard route, but yeah, I think MFN is kind of, most people ask for that. I was just going to say, like, if you're going to do a cover, then absolutely research the publisher and send it to them, because they might pitch it for you. We do that quite a lot, where we've got a lot of big songs, and either the artist is won't clear for sync, or it's just too big, or it's just a really different style that works a lot better for sync. And if we find these things on Spotify, we'll reach out to the creators. But that's also kind of another neat little trick that and also check with the publisher that it will clear for sync, because some songs won't. But yeah, absolutely, there's nothing to stop you doing that.
Yeah, I mean, again, from the Ivors Academy point of view, you want to be rewarded for any work you do, but it is just really interesting to know, what you can and can't use, and the different values of the songs you might want to cover for a sync opportunity, etc. So we've only got about 10 minutes left, so I think maybe we could go around and take a few top tips for people getting started in sync. And Mark, do you want to go first with some key takeaways?
Yeah, I'll go with a couple of tips, but I'm going to start just by finishing on the last part of the conversation, which is to do with kind of like money and value. And just to follow on what you were saying about the perspective of the Ivors, and it's worth mentioning as well that there's a new breed of kind of production library that are popping up, which are trying to buy out 100% of the back end of the copyright. So if you imagine, as I said, for stuff that we do for productions, we split our PRS with the production company, but there is now a school of library which they will take 100% of your PRS. And it's my personal opinion, but I think it's also the professional opinion of all of my colleagues, that those are libraries to avoid. Because if you want to talk about remuneration for composers for sync, be it advertising or TV or film or whatever, what is the most important to us is the legacy royalty. It's more important than the upfront payment, to be completely honest. So it's important that as people within the music community, we make sure that we value and protect those back-end rights. And I know there is a campaign specifically the Ivors and the Musicians Union have done called Composers Against Buyouts, which is, where you can find a lot more information about that sort of thing. So I just want to flag that on the tail end of the kind of money chat.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I mean,
on that quickly, Mark, sorry to interrupt.
No, it's all right.
On the Ivors Academy website, if you just Google actually Composers Against Buyouts, there's a page that has a really nice animation that explains the Composers Against Bias campaign and why it's important that creators can retain the rights so they're rewarded over time as well. So if you want to find out more about what Mark just said, just go to the Ivors Academy website or Google Composers Against Buyout campaign. Back over to you, Mark.
Okay, so I'm going to give the tip now, and the tip is, it's kind of like following on from what I was saying before, which is that I think the most important thing that you can do if you're emerging in this area is to absolutely understand your own repertoire and where it fits within the landscape. The thing that Robyn and I think Clare said as well, which was, okay, where in media can I hear music that sounds within 5% of the music that I make being used? That's the starting point. If you can't identify other places where music like yours is being used, then you have to really think about whether sync is something that you want to put energy into, because all the things that were said in the presentation about kind of metadata and the master and PPL and PRS, all those things are absolutely critical, because you won't get through unless you have done all those things. However, if you don't know where music like yours is being used, then you don't have a chance of moving forward, because you're basically, you're just in the wind. That's the most important thing. The starting point is, where else is music sounds like the music I make being used, and then you can do all that tracking across from there, and then do all the kind of procedural stuff that you have to do. But that's the starting point for me anyway.
That's great. And absolutely, I've spoken to a music supervisor recently that couldn't find 100% MCPS for a boy's own track, and therefore wasn't able to use it. So, you would think that, these small...
Every cloud has a silver lining, eh?
Exactly. So therefore, it was open for Mark and his band of children composers to zoom in and replace Boyzone in that particular instance. No, yeah. So I guess it's, little admin things are boring, but they're so important to allow you to be able to use your work. So Clare, do you have any key takeaways for everybody?
Yeah, I think we've really covered it. I mean, I was going to say the accounting for 100%. You'd really, and I think that speaks to also if there's like a sample, all of those little nitty gritty things. I just want to account for 100% of it. Otherwise, I just can't sync that track. So that's super important. And then also just be bold. I think, sort of, as Robyn was saying, like, get people's emails, email them, send them music, because you just don't know who's going to be listening. So I think just be bold and get it out there.
And Robyn, over to you for the sort of closing tip of the day.
Oh God, no pressure. I'd say, well, I always kind of say, like, the best thing you can have is your network, and that's not only your network of music supervisors who are using your music, but also kind of other writers that you're writing with, because so many opportunities can come through them. Maybe they've got a job that they can't fulfill, so maybe you can kind of step in there, or maybe they need someone who can help them write something, and you can kind of gain experience that way. Or even just, if you want to ring them up and say, I've been offered this deal, what do you think of this price? Or, is there anything, could you read this contract? So I think kind of really building your network, and like I said, most people are just happy to receive an email, especially if you're complimenting their work. And I think, yeah, definitely, the bigger the network, the further you'll go, really.
And Clare, what you were saying, like, just reminded me of a story a supervisor told me where there was a track that had so many samples on that they had to like track down. The person who owned the track was off the grid, was like, I don't do phones. So they had to track down like a neighbor via phone to go and get permission to use that track and it ended up being a complete nightmare. So if you make the process difficult, then you might not get your work used, I think was the moral of that one. But I absolutely loved your be bold, because we are at Wide Days after all, and being Wide Days is all about being wide and being bold and getting out there. So I think that's just like a really perfect sort of sentiment to finish off the panel. We're a couple minutes early, but I feel like we'll leave with a bang on that one. So thank you very much, everybody. It was a pleasure to have you on, and I hope this was all very insightful for the audience, and thank you. Have a good festival.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Nicky.
Thanks,
Thank
Nicky.
you.